இன்றைக்கு அகில இந்திய காங்கிரஸ் கட்சியினுடைய அறிவுறுத்தலின் பிரகாரம் சசி தரூர் அவர்கள் ஊடகங்களை சந்திப்பதற்காக சென்னைக்கு வந்திருக்கிறார். Sasi Tharoor is a gem in our Congress party. He served in UN also. He is one of the intellectual leader among the Congress leadership. Now he is ready to answer what are the questions you have raised, especially regarding BJP, Modi and their team. He is a loaded gun. He is ready to fire. Please, sir. Please.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Very good to see Mr. Alagiri here. The Secretary from AICC and senior office bearers of the Tamil Nadu Congress Committee. Good to see all of you. I see some of you are wearing masks, some of you are not wearing masks, but I think most of us feel suffocated in these masks in this very, very challenging time of the second wave of COVID and anticipation of the third wave. And I have to say that if we are feeling suffocated, we are feeling even more suffocated by the alarming rise in prices that is confronting the nation right now after 7 years of this government's rule. You may have noticed that yesterday there was one more price increase, a hike in the prices of petrol and diesel, the 8th time in July alone. In fact, in Chennai today, the price of petrol is 102.25 per litre and diesel is 94.40 paise in Chennai today. You're lucky you're not in Mumbai, because in Mumbai it's 107.54 per litre of petrol and 97.45 of diesel. So at least by comparison, you're saving 2 or 3 rupees, but I can tell you it is an outrageous price. If you look at the LPG gas cylinders, subsidized gas cylinders, the people in Chennai are paying 869 rupees today. But if you were in Patna, the capital of Bihar, you would be paying 933 rupees. Now that is the kind of picture that we have seen after 7 years of BJP misrule and mismanagement of the economy. Let me take a couple of minutes of your time and then I'll take your questions. The increase in the price of fuel is very illustrative. Up to the elections, they tried not to do anything dramatic. After the 4th of May, in these 10 weeks, they have raised petrol and diesel prices 40 times. 40 times in just 10 weeks. Can you imagine? That's an average of 4 price increases a week once the election is over. So we are going to be up for the high jump between now and the next elections, it looks like. In the last period, I would say that the increase in petrol prices just since the 4th of May is about 12 rupees in petrol and about 10 rupees in diesel, literally in just 10 weeks. Now, these series of hikes are coming at a time when our country's economy is reeling under the mismanagement of the Modi government. We have the highest unemployment ever recorded in India since they started recording figures. 8.1% is the last figure that I've seen, and that does not even count the disguised unemployment in the informal sector. If you look at the wages, many companies are cutting wages. People have no choice. If they want to work, they have to accept a lower salary. Do you know that 97% of Indian households have told a recent survey that they are poorer this year than last year, poorer last year than the year before? 97%. So it's a very small percentage that have been able to escape the worst of the economic damage done by this government. And I have to tell you that the worst in many ways is the fact that the fuel price increase administered by the Modi government has impacted the price of everything else, with the result that even the prices of vegetables, fruits, pulses, oil, essential household items have all increased. I think all of you know this from your own household expenses. We are looking at a situation that if you want to eat, food inflation is 5.6%, pulses inflation is 10%, fruits inflation is 13%, oils and fats 35% price increase this year. If you want to cook what you have bought, then you are facing the incredibly high prices of fuel that I've already mentioned to you. If you want to light a lamp in your household or cook, you'll find that the household fuel and lighting is 13% higher. And then if you want to go to work, if you still have a job, transport inflation is 12%. So how are people in our country meant to eat, to cook, to travel, to light up their homes in circumstances where the government is doing this? Now let me explain that this is not ordinary inflation. I mean, any economic student will tell you, inflation usually in a normal, healthy economy is for two reasons: either because demand is going up, supply is not there, therefore prices go up, or because people have so much money in their hands and the government may have given them so much money that they spend too much and so prices go up. Neither of these is true in India. Demand is not going up, it's going down. People have not been given money. As you know, this government is the worst of all the major economies in terms of how little fiscal stimulus they have given to help poor people and lower middle class people to manage with this economy. So if it's not this, what is the reason? There are three main reasons. The first and most important is the increase of taxes by the Modi government. Taxes on fuel has been particularly outrageous. And if any BJP spokesman tells you it's because of global prices, tell them we have facts and figures that show it's not true. When global prices were $125 at the time of the UPA government, at that time, we were able to give you petrol at 65 rupees and diesel at 44 rupees. Today, the global price is not 125. It's slowly going up, but it's only about $75. And yet, we are paying over 100 for petrol and over 90 for diesel. So that's the first answer. I should stress that the government has been using taxes on fuel as a way of increasing its own coffers, with a complete disregard for the common person, for the ordinary citizen of India. In fact, the government has collected 4.2 lakh crores in the last fiscal year only from petrol and diesel taxes, 4.2 lakh crores, whereas it is 3 times the last collection by the UPA government when global prices were higher. So let us have no illusions about this. And let me explain one very important aspect about the increase of taxes and fuel. I've got some numbers. If you'll allow me to give you some numbers, it's worth knowing that when the UPA government was in power, if you take just petrol, for example, the UPA government collected a cess of 6 rupees 45 paise on every litre of petrol. But then the state governments got 3 rupees. So 1/3 of as much as half of what the central government was collecting was going to the states. When the India government came, they dramatically raised prices. Global prices of crude had dropped, so they kept raising taxes. And by 2017, the first NDA government, 17.5 rupees they were keeping, but the states were still getting 3.98. What has happened in 2021 after this year's budget? I was having breakfast with your finance minister of Tamil Nadu, Mr. PTR Palanivel Thiagaraj, and he was telling me on petrol, the central government keeps 32 rupees 33 paise and the state government gets 57 paise. And this is because the bulk of the increase has been done through the form of cess. And cess is not money which is divided with the states. So this, to my mind, is extremely important. 96% of all petrol taxes are in the non-divisible kitty going only to Delhi, to the central government, and the state governments are given no money to actually spend here. Now, in these circumstances, we're looking at a very critical situation when it comes to fuel prices. But there are two more factors I want to mention, then I'll take your questions. Import duties on absolutely essential items of household expenditure have gone up under the BJP government, NDA government. Even palm oil, which all of us use in our kitchens, and pulses, which all of us in Indian cooking cannot avoid. Pulses, palm oil have had high increases in import duties. And the third factor, which many of you are aware because you shop yourselves, has been GST rates. Not only has GST been an irrational tax, hastily implemented in a way in which in many ways the system design itself was flawed, with 5 rates plus additional rates and so on. But if you look at basic household items, it is shocking that there are 12 to 18% GST rates on toothpaste, on toiletries, on food items, on processed foods, even on nuts. But honestly, this policy is truly nuts. It's just a policy that makes no sense, because we all know that GST is an indirect tax. A direct tax is an income tax, right? So when you're paying an income tax, you will actually, the richer person will pay more, the poorer person will pay less. That's logical. And it's a progressive tax. Whereas GST is a regressive tax, because whether you're earning 10,000 rupees a month or a lakh of rupees a month or 10 lakhs or more, you're paying the same percentage. And in terms of your income, it means nothing. If you're a rich person, it means a lot more if you're an ordinary person. And this is why I want to end my remarks today by making 3 demands on behalf of the Congress party of this government. Reduce taxes and cess on fuel, number 1. And when I say reduce, I mean reduce significantly. They should cut the fuel taxes, and they should also give a larger share of the taxes they're collecting to the state governments. Number 2, reduce import duties on essential items of household consumption. And number 3, rationalize, simplify, and reduce GST rates on items consumed by ordinary citizens of India. There is no reason why your toothpaste, your toiletry, your shirt, your rubber chappal, your plastic bucket should be taxed at this kind of rate. It is extremely important that ordinary people should get relief. We had demanded that the government give a fiscal stimulus in terms of financial assistance to the lower income people, unemployed people, and so on. The government has failed to do that. The fiscal stimulus has been very disappointing. At the very least, by reducing taxes, they will be able to put some money in the hands of the ordinary people of India. I'll stop there and take your questions, but this is the one demand we all have. We really must try and save our public. And I want to add, Parliament is starting on Monday. I think my fellow MP from Kanyakumari is here. We are going to go and raise these issues in Parliament as well. But we wanted the people of India to be aware that this is very much a major concern of the Congress party. We have many other concerns. I'm happy to take your questions. Thank you very much. Yeah. Yeah. We have a number of major issues simultaneously. I'll just flag a few. This one that I mentioned to you, petrol price increase and overall taxation by the government on these areas will have to be tackled. Secondly is the mismanagement of the economy, resulting in record unemployment in this country, closure of MSMEs. I think even the ADMK government industry minister had told your state assembly that some 50,000 MSMEs in Tamil Nadu have closed in 1 year. That was a kind of problem created because of the government's mismanagement. The disaster of demonetization, which Dr. Manmohan Singh warned about, which took 2.5% off the economy, has never been overcome. They have never repaired the damage they did to the economy. So the overall management of the economy will be a second issue. A third issue, I'm not giving an order of priority. These are all equally important. Farmers' agitation. We are facing a very severe situation where for 9 months now, the farmers from northern Indian states are besieging Delhi. They're surrounding the city of Delhi. and it's absolutely indispensable that their concerns be heard. The government should not be passing central laws without consulting those affected. Number four, and this is, as I said, not priority, all equally important, we have the border situation with China, which in our view is very serious. The government has lost territory. The Chinese have taken advantages. They've fortified their positions. They have increased their deployments in the border areas. And what is interesting is that our government is silent. They're not taking the Indian people into confidence. The government talked about talks of disengagement. They've had 11 rounds of talks. The Chinese have not budged. And the problem we're facing with that is that in our country today, this government does not want to discuss either in Parliament or in the parliamentary committees or with the people of India what the real situation is, when there is a national humiliation that's potentially staring us in the face. And the government believes that by concealing the reality, they can avoid accountability for their failures. And number five, you have the Rafale crisis. The French government, a so-called juge d'instruction, which means an investigating judge, has started an inquiry into the Rafale deal. And the Rafale deal, we had questioned it, as you may remember, when the government changed the terms of that deal. UPA had agreed to buy 126 aircraft. NDA reduced it to 36. UPA had wanted the bulk of this aircraft to be manufactured by an Indian public sector firm, Hindustan Aeronautics in Bangalore. Instead, this government basically bought it off the shelf, but with an offset agreement with an Anil Ambani-led company that was cooperating with Dassault. And in these circumstances, we had asked already for an inquiry. And you may remember, I think there's a correspondent here from The Hindu. The Hindu ran a series of exposés at that time about the facts and figures they were able to unearth. But there was absolutely no discussion. And after a couple of years, in the Indian public space, there was no discussion. But the French did not give up. And now a judge in France is going to be conducting an inquiry. It seems to me very important that we, in India, should be asking the same questions that the French are asking. The French may have sold aircraft, but we have bought the aircraft. It is our taxpayers' money that has been spent. We have that much more need to find out the truth than the French have. And yet the French are taking the trouble and we are not. So we would certainly demand a full-fledged inquiry. And one of the issues we will be raising in Parliament is whether there should not be a joint parliamentary committee to look into questions of Rafale. And then finally, the biggest perhaps in some ways of all these issues, the most urgent that affects us all, is the mismanagement of COVID. COVID has caused so many deaths in our country. But even worse has been the mismanagement of basic supplies, lack of oxygen in many hospitals, vaccinations not being ordered by the government. So if you look, I did an article in a weekly magazine called the COVID Charge Sheet, where I laid out the charges against the government one after the other. There has been a colossal failure by the government. And the terrible image that many of you have seen of bodies floating down the river Ganga, this is the condition to which this BJP government has reduced our people in the face of this COVID onslaught. Because there are not enough vaccines, very many vaccination centers are running short of supplies. Tamil Nadu has a shortage of COVID vaccinations today. And it's not Tamil Nadu's fault because the orders should have been placed a long time ago by the central government. And that's why I say that if there is a third wave in India, it is not Mother Nature. It is Mr. Modi and his government who should be blamed because they did not vaccinate a large enough percentage of Indians. 5% of Indians are vaccinated, whereas those countries which already placed their orders for vaccinations by August of last year, those countries are above 50%. In the case of UK, 75% of their population have been vaccinated. In our case, it is only 5%. So we really have a lot of ground to cover. And as far as the Parliament session is concerned, these are just 7 issues, plus God knows what other failures of the government are going to happen in the next little while that we'll have to raise with them.
Also, is there any pressure from the state government or from in Congress? You have regarding the interstate river issue, regarding the Meghalaya issue, which has been discussed, and there is the input given from your colleague here to take to raise that.
I think at this stage, the feeling on everybody's part is we should see this resolved amicably. We would like the people of Tamil Nadu and Karnataka both to be happy. And there are competent authorities working on it. I'm not sure that a statement now would be helpful. Let's see what they can do.
Also, it is stated that it's because of BJP government, their central government made us that will of
Let us see it. I don't want to comment on that right now. At this stage, we will work in a very constructive spirit.
இந்த மேகதாது இஷ்யூ தமிழ்நாடு காங்கிரஸ் ஒரு தெளிவான நிலையை உங்களுக்கு சொல்லியிருக்கிறது. எங்களை பொறுத்தவரை அந்த திட்டத்தை நிறைவேற்றினால் தமிழகம் சாதாரண பாதிப்பல்ல, பெரிய அளவில் பாதிக்கப்படும். ஏற்கனவே நடுவர் நீதிமன்றம் அவர்களுக்கு 14 டிஎம்சி பெங்களூர் நகரத்திற்கான குடிநீரை கொடுத்திருக்கிறது. எனவே மேற்கொண்டு ஒரு அணை கட்டி அவர்களுக்கு குடிநீர் தேவையில்லை. இரண்டாவது, மின்சாரம் வேண்டும் என்பதற்காக அவர்கள் அந்த அணையை கட்டுவதாக சொல்கிறார்கள். அதுவும் தேவையில்லாத ஒன்று. சோலார் இருக்கிறது. சோலார் மூலமாக எவ்வளோ வேண்டுமானாலும் மின்சாரத்தை அவங்க தயாரிச்சுக்கலாம் இல்லையா? தமிழ்நாட்டில் சர்ப்ளஸாக மின்சாரம் இருக்குது. அவங்க நமக்கு தண்ணீர் தரட்டும், நாம் அவங்களுக்கு மின்சாரம் கொடுப்போம். ஸோ நம்ம பொறுத்த வரைக்கும் தமிழக காங்கிரஸ் இந்த விஷயத்தில் தெளிவாக இருக்கிறது. இதில் கர்நாடக காங்கிரஸினுடைய நிலை என்ன, அகில இந்திய காங்கிரஸினுடைய நிலை என்ன என்பதெல்லாம் வேற. தமிழக காங்கிரஸினுடைய நிலைதான் முக்கியமானது. அதில் நாங்கள் உறுதியாக இருக்கிறோம். நாங்கள் தமிழக முதலமைச்சரோடு இணைந்து அந்த விஷயத்தில் அவருக்கு தோளோடு தோள் நின்று ஒத்துழைப்பதற்கு நாங்கள் தயாராக இருக்கோம்.
இன்னைக்கு நம்ம அனைத்து கூட்டம் அந்த எதிர்க்க நிலைமையில இன்னைக்கு அனைத்து கட்சி கூட்டம் கர்நாடகாவோட முதல்வருக்கு சிஎம் இன்னைக்கு டைம் கொடுக்குறாரு.
கர்நாடக
முதலமைச்சரை சமநாட்டிய சந்திக்கிறதுக்கு நேரம் ஒதுக்கியிருக்காரு.
ஏன்னா ஒரு பிரைம் மினிஸ்டர் சார், வாட் இஸ் த ஸ்டேஜ் இன் இட்? பிரைம் மினிஸ்டர் மீட்ஸ் த சீஃப் மினிஸ்டர். தட் இஸ் காமன் இஷ்யூ. There is no political importance. Sir, it is common, sir. It is common. There is nothing special.
What is your stand?
Sorry, BJP government?
Raise a voice to divide Tamil Nadu.
I know, Kongu Nadu and so on. I think this is an extremely regressive approach on the part of the central government. First of all, there is no such thing constitutionally. And they should, at the very more, either they can give the gentleman's address and which district he comes from, or they can say Tamil Nadu. They cannot just create new categories when they are announcing the appointment of a minister. That was really out of order. It was highly irregular. And I must say that we do not approve of that. But beyond that, the entire process of state reorganization can only be done amicably. We saw this with the success of Madhya Pradesh and Chhattisgarh, of UP and Uttarakhand, where all parties, including the parent state, wanted a division. But where the parent state has not asked for it, where there is no popular demand, where there is no political majority in favor of such a proposal, how can somebody sitting in Delhi invent a new category? The state's reorganization is a highly sensitive issue in our country. Now, my own very frank view is that the people of Tamil Nadu should decide for themselves what they want Tamil Nadu to look like. And right now, everybody wants Tamil Nadu to be Tamil Nadu. So where is the discussion? Why is it even necessary?
Dr. Shashi Tharoor, co-head of the IT panel. So there is a growing concern of the privacy from the big tech. So do you think that companies are making an effort to be more transparent? Part two question. What is your comment on the central government's approach with the IT companies?
Look, on the first part of your question, there is no question that the Supreme Court judgment in the Puttaswamy case has established a right to privacy in our country. Every one of us, a citizen of India, has a right to privacy. And if we have a right to privacy, then everybody, whether it's the central government, state governments, or private companies and IT companies, have to respect it. They have no choice but to respect it. As far as I'm concerned, that is a duty. It doesn't matter whether I'm talking as chairman of the IT committee or just as an ordinary citizen. It is a fundamental obligation on everyone operating in India to respect our privacy. On the second part, please forgive me for not answering directly, because as chairman of the Committee of IT, I have to work with the government, work with the companies, and we have certain conventions about what is inappropriate for us to talk about. I can discuss any report I have submitted to Parliament, but I cannot give opinions like that. I'm not speaking as a columnist or a commentator. On this one, second part, I'll pass. Yes, ma'am.
Tamil Nadu State President of the BJP, Mr. Annamalai, has recently told that they will bring the media under control in Tamil Nadu within the next 6 months.
Media under control.
BJP.
So he has also pointed out the fact that the former president of state BJP, Mr. Raimudan, is now in the Minister of State for IMD in his assignment. So he pointed out the fact and he told his statement. So what is your take on it?
My take, first of all, is that this country is fortunately not governed by the BJP, but under a constitution. The constitution has guaranteed certain rights to all Indian citizens. Those rights have been interpreted and upheld over 70 years by the Supreme Court. So you have a number of Supreme Court judgments on freedom of the press, on media, and so on. I don't think that any BJP official is going to be able to control the media in Tamil Nadu or anywhere else, because if they did that, this country would cease to be a democracy, and that, I think, is not at least the official declared objective of the BJP, even in the centre. My advice to people who make such statements is to think carefully before speaking. And as far as the media is concerned in our country, many of us feel that the media has been too obliging to the government, not that it has been too free. I think we would like to see the media stand up and speak with courage about the issues facing the common Indian citizen, rather than always showing only understanding for the government position. But for the ruling party to have people saying such things is out of the question. And let me add that not only is there a constitution, there is also a parliament, there is a judiciary, there are various ways in which any such attempt can be legitimately challenged.
So Tamil Nadu government is opposing NEET. The Tamil Nadu government is opposing NEET, and central government is not telling recording this. And what is your stand on NEET? And do you think that other states of India should join hands with Tamil Nadu?
Well, this has been a strong position of the Tamil Nadu state government under both the present government and the previous government, I believe, that they are against NEET. The other parties have not formally taken a position on this. Certainly, I should point out that there have been other educational studies that have called for a national examination. I think what we need to do is have more dialogue. That is, we need to see what are the concerns of the Tamil Nadu government. And those are very legitimate concerns that we have seen expressed, and how those concerns can be addressed. Maybe the first thing to do is not to immediately abolish the examination, because I think this has gone through a judicial process and the examination still is there. It's rather to talk and conciliate. The democratic way is to see why are people concerned, in this case, why is Tamil Nadu concerned, and on the basis of that concern, find out if there is a solution. I must say that I think we want a solution that will not in any way handicap students of Tamil Nadu, because they are also perhaps interested in careers nationwide. And it's important to find a solution that bears their interests in mind, while respecting very much the concerns of the Tamil Nadu government. But to this point, I'm not aware of a number of states supporting Tamil Nadu on this. More dialogue is required, there is no doubt about it.
At the same time, what is your stand on 10% reservation?
On?
What is your stand on 10% reservation?
10% of reservations for the economically weaker sections of the so-called forward caste. Is that what you mean? See, that again is passed by Parliament with a constitutional amendment. So my having an opinion is, to be honest, academic. This is now the law of the land. And the law of the land says that an economic criterion will be applied also to the forward caste, and 10% of those who are the weakest should also be benefiting. There is a whole philosophical debate in our country between reservations to undo social injustice and reservations as a tool to overcome economic disability. And in many cases, the two are the same. A Dalit community was often socially disadvantaged and also economically disadvantaged. Now, when you look at a forward community, people will say they're not socially disadvantaged. They have no problem. Why should they get reservation? But they may be very poor people. They may be literally below the poverty line. What do you do for them? So these are the philosophical dilemmas and the political dilemmas. But in any case, there is now a constitutional amendment. I think we just have to work with it and make it work effective.
On the issue of Kaveri, regarding Karnataka, both national parties, with the Congress or the BJP, have political stakes in Kaveri.
We have political stakes in both states.
But we have been able to capture power there, not in Tamil Nadu, at least for the last 3 decades. My question is it important for these two national parties to make sure they set aside their political stakes and look at this in an objective, non-political, which that these issues will be set. Otherwise, whether the power will take a different stand, or the power will take a different stand.
No, I think on all interstate disputes, our consistent position has been that there should be a completely non-political institution to resolve them. You need to be able to talk frankly between states, whoever is in power. Frankly, some of the problems will even be if the same party is in power in both states. Of course, in the southern states, we've had issues between Karnataka and Tamil Nadu, which so happens have had different parties. But the principle is the same, that if you can actually talk, explain your point of view, discuss, argue, and have it resolved via an independent, often central government supported autonomous institution that will take everyone's interest into account, that is the best way to go forward. A party like the Congress, as Mr. Alagiri is also saying, if I'm sitting here next to him, he is giving a very strong, clear position on behalf of the Tamil Nadu Congress Committee. If I was in Bangalore instead, the Karnataka Pradesh Congress Committee leader might say something different. So the point is, let me finish my sentence. The point is that a political answer is no answer. That a resolution is what is needed rather than a political answer.
In this issue, the Supreme Court has given a clear verdict. Nobody wants to prevail upon your principles to say, to follow that. Instead, typical sign political and open cyber act.
Look, these people have managed to win an election and form the central government. Let us see them exercising their responsibilities constructively and finding a solution. Okay.
BJP has accused that low petrol price of the Congress is an economic mismanagement.
Economic?
Because of the low petrol prices during the UPA regime, we have a lot of, the fiscal deficit is rising up due to this economic mismanagement of the Manmohan Singh government.
The fiscal deficit under the Modi BJP government is double the fiscal deficit at its worst in the UPA government. So right now we are expecting an 8% fiscal deficit this coming financial year. That's how badly the Modi government is doing. So how can they blame UPA? They've been in power for 7 years. When the UPA was in power, our interest was to protect the ordinary person in India. Our interest was to ensure that, for example, we had relatively affordable petrol and diesel rates. Basically because that's all the Indian consumer could afford, but also because we were conscious that rates of petrol and diesel have a knock-on effect on other items. Even the poorest person buying a shirt or a pair of rubber slippers, that shirt, that slippers has to be transported from a factory to the shop or the market where he buys them. And that transportation takes place in a vehicle using petrol or diesel. So if that petrol diesel price goes up, even the simplest items also become more expensive. This was our logic. We had to shield the consumer. Similarly, telecoms rates. We actually kept telecoms rates very low and affordable because we said, let there be a communications revolution in our country. So you have to look at the larger public good. What is the overall policy objective? And not only absolute numbers like the fiscal deficit. When Mr. Modi came to power, he had such a windfall because international crude oil prices dropped from $127 in the week before he came to power all the way down to as low as $20 during his first couple of years in office. Did any of you see the benefit of that? No. Did you pay less for petrol and fuel? No. You paid more. First of all, you paid the same amount because he kept on raising the taxes. The tax portion kept on going up. Then when fuel prices went up, tax also went up. So now you have had a ridiculously extortionate approach by this government in terms of tax gouging, taking money out of the pocket of the ordinary citizen of India, the Aam Aadmi, and putting it in the coffers of Mr. Modi's government. And let us say that, when Rahul Gandhi called this government a suit boot sarkar, this is what it means. Only those in suit boots are actually flourishing. Everybody else, middle class, lower middle class, and the poor. And you know that the latest study I saw is that 230 million, 23 crore Indians have been pushed below the poverty line in the last 2 years. People who had broken free of poverty, were earning a decent wage, were no longer considered BPL. They have now collapsed because of the mismanagement of the economy by the Modi government. So we must understand that when the Congress party points the fingers at the BJP, we have a track record to show you we understood what to do. For 10 years, we did the right thing. And these people for 7 years have consistently failed to do the right thing. They have done the wrong thing. They have made mistake after mistake. And the nation is paying the price for their failure.
So what about the current Punjab scenario where there's a between captain?
Look, I read the media just as you do. Let it be resolved by the party. Anyone else?
Okay, sir.
Okay, thank you very much.